My childhood best friend stole my identity, and now she's trying to legally adopt my daughter. I never thought I would be in this position. Looking over my shoulder every time I leave my apartment, afraid to check my mailbox or answer phone calls, worried that my own daughter might be taken away from me by someone I once considered the closest friend I ever had. But here I am, living through what feels like a surreal nightmare. My name is Haley, 28F, and I have a daughter, Lily, 5F, who is my entire world. The person threatening to upend our lives is Claire, 28F, my childhood best friend. She's the one who held my hand during our first day of kindergarten, who shared secrets with me at sleepovers, who once knew me better than I knew myself. And now, she has stolen my identity in ways I could never have imagined, and is making moves to legally adopt Lily, claiming I'm an unfit mother. It's hard to know where to begin because this tangled mess has so many starting points, so many red flags I ignored or rationalized away. When Claire and I were kids, we were nearly inseparable. I grew up in a modest neighborhood where my parents struggled to keep the bills paid. My dad worked long hours as a mechanic, and my mom jumped between various temp office jobs. Meanwhile, Claire's parents had more money than they seemed to know what to do with. They owned a lake house, took lavish vacations, and donated generously to local events, so their names always appeared in the newspaper's Community Spotlight section. Claire herself was bright, loud, full of life. She charged into every new experience with a level of confidence I envied. By contrast, I was more reserved, clinging to her as if she were my social lifeline. When we were in elementary school, none of the class distinctions mattered to us. She never once made me feel bad for not having the trendiest clothes or the latest gadgets. She loved coming over to my place, where my mom would let us bake cookies from scratch, making a huge mess in the process. We'd laugh until our stomachs hurt, drifting off to sleep in my little bedroom while rewatching the same Disney movies on VHS. She was the first person to ever spend the night at my house. I remember being embarrassed by the worn furniture in the living room, but she seemed to find it cozy, calling it lived in and welcoming. Around middle school, I started noticing small things about Claire that felt off. Occasionally, she'd lie about weird stuff, like telling classmates that she had a cousin who was a famous actress, or that her mom owned a chain of clothing stores. It seemed harmless, just typical kid bragging, but as time went on, the fibs got more elaborate, more concerning. Whenever I'd call her out on it, she'd shrug and say she was just practicing her storytelling, and I'd let it go because I didn't want to lose her friendship. She was still the person who would split her lunch with me if I forgot mine, or sneak me extra candy during class movie day. To me, those small acts of kindness outweighed the strange lies. As we reached high school, our paths began to diverge. I, 14F at the time, got a part-time job cleaning offices on the weekends to help my parents with groceries. Claire, 14F, spent that same time at cheerleading practice, followed by shopping trips with her mom's credit card. We stayed close, but I began to notice how her life seemed to revolve around impressing the popular crowd, while mine was about survival and helping my family. She would sometimes let me borrow cute outfits for parties so I could fit in better, and I'd be grateful. But beneath that gratitude, I felt a strange sense of discomfort, like I was an accessory in her perfect teenage life. There was one incident in our junior year that, in hindsight, should have been a massive red flag. I'd saved up enough money to buy a used laptop for school, and I was so proud that I could finally do my homework without having to wait in line at the public library. Claire came over, saw it, and asked if she could check her email. I said sure, no problem. Later, I discovered she had snooped through some of my personal files. Nothing incriminating, just photos and private journal entries I kept. She never admitted it, but I knew because I found files open that I hadn't touched in months. When I confronted her, she got defensive, accusing me of not trusting her. I backed down, feeling guilty for questioning my best friend. We made up quickly, and it wasn't brought up again. She graduated near the top of our class, got a scholarship for college, and moved to another state. I stayed local, working multiple jobs to afford community college classes here and there. Life happened in a flurry of odd shifts and mounting bills. I ended up pregnant at 23, a surprise that sent my already precarious life into a tailspin. The father, a guy named Dylan, 27M at the time, decided early on that fatherhood wasn't for him. He left for California to chase his music dreams. And I didn't hear from him again until Lily was nearly 1. By then, I was scraping by, working as a receptionist at a dental office, with my mom stepping in to babysit Lily whenever she could. It was a stressful time, but Lily became my light, my reason to push through. During those years, Claire and I had minimal contact. She sent the occasional text, more like a holiday greeting than an actual conversation. I figured she was busy with college life, and I was too caught up in single motherhood to really push for more connection. My social media presence was sparse. I hardly had time to post anything but the occasional baby photo. Meanwhile, her online life looked perfect. She was traveling, partying, meeting interesting people, living in a nice apartment. She'd sometimes drop a comment like, "Wish you could be here," under a photo of her at a beach resort, but it always felt obligatory. Then, when Lily was about 3, Claire appeared in my life again. She reached out to say she was moving back to our hometown and would love to reconnect. I remember feeling a surge of relief and excitement, thinking maybe I'd get a bit of the old friendship back, maybe some support. I invited her over for dinner, spent the whole day cleaning my tiny apartment and prepping a meal I hoped she'd like. Lily, a chatty toddler by then, was excited to meet Mommy's friend. Claire arrived in a sleek car, dressed in designer clothes, wearing a smile that felt both nostalgic and brand new at the same time. She swept Lily into a hug, complimented the apartment as cozy, and said she'd been itching to catch up with me, that she missed me terribly. At first, things were good. She offered to babysit Lily a few times so I could pick up extra hours at work. She brought gifts for Lily, a puzzle set, fancy kids' clothes, little stuffed animals, and Lily adored the attention from this glamorous, fun-loving adult. Claire would lounge on my couch, flipping through magazines or scrolling on her phone while Lily played, and I'd come home to an apartment that was almost too quiet, with Lily already asleep and Claire telling me how much the little angel reminded her of me. It warmed my heart, thinking my oldest friend cared about my daughter like she was part of her own family. But then odd things started happening. I'd go to pay my phone bill and notice an unexpected charge for an upgraded plan I never authorized. I'd get a call from a credit card company asking to verify an application I didn't submit. Bank statements showed small but consistent withdrawals I hadn't made. Confusion gave way to fear, and I started digging through my finances, trying to figure out if I'd been hacked. I changed all my passwords, ordered new debit cards, and tried to move on. It never crossed my mind to suspect Claire. Not at that time. If anything, I blamed some unknown scammer. The real shock came when I tried to apply for a better apartment closer to my job. I'd been saving for months for the deposit, excited to move Lily into a place with a small backyard so she could play. But the rental office ran my credit report and told me I was declined due to multiple delinquent accounts. I stared at them in disbelief, feeling the blood drain from my face. I'd been working so hard to keep my finances in order, paying off small debts one by one. How was it possible that I was suddenly drowning in overdue credit cards, consumer loans, and even a car lease I never took out? The puzzle pieces started forming a sickening picture. Someone had stolen my identity on a scale I hadn't realized was possible. I spent days filing police reports, contacting each credit bureau, and trying to dispute charges. The detective I spoke with was sympathetic but blunt. Identity theft cases were tough to crack unless there was a clear suspect and evidence. I sat in the station, tears in my eyes, explaining that I had no idea who could have done this. My mind briefly flickered to Claire, but I pushed the thought away, reminding myself that she was my best friend. The detective mentioned that sometimes the culprit was someone the victim knew, but I smiled tightly, insisting that couldn't be it. He gave me a weary nod, as if he'd heard that line 1,000,000 times. Over the following weeks, I felt my life spiral further out of control. The stress took its toll on my health. I lost weight, barely slept, and snapped at Lily for small things. I hated myself for that, for allowing this mess to seep into my relationship with my daughter. I kept telling myself that if I just worked a little harder and cut out every unnecessary expense, I could climb out of the financial hole. My mom offered what little help she could, but she was already strapped for cash. Lily's father was still MIA, so no child support checks were coming my way. My landlord threatened eviction if I fell behind on rent, even once. It felt like the walls were closing in, and I was powerless to stop it. Around this time, Claire's behavior began to shift. She stopped offering to babysit as much, and when she did, she seemed unusually interested in the details of my routine. How often Lily went to the doctor, what kind of insurance I had, whether I had any life insurance policies for myself. She claimed it was just because she was concerned about us, that she wanted to help me plan. But it made me uneasy. I shrugged it off as my anxiety talking because she still showed up with groceries on occasion or offered a random gift for Lily. And let's face it, I was desperate. Having someone around who appeared to care was a lifeline I clung to. The day I finally discovered the smoking gun that implicated Claire was both shattering and surreal. I was at her apartment, which was in a much nicer part of town. She asked me to watch her dog for a minute while she ran an errand. Lily was coloring at the kitchen table, humming a tune. I decided to grab a glass of water, so I opened one of the cabinets, looking for a cup. That's when I saw a stack of letters with my name on them, but her address. My mouth went dry. I recognized some of them as credit statements for accounts I didn't open. My hands trembled as I pulled them out, my vision blurring with tears and rage. The sense of betrayal was immediate and overwhelming. When Claire got back, she found me standing by the open cabinet with the letters in my hand. She froze in the doorway, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. I asked her why she had them. At first, she tried to play dumb, insisting she didn't know what I was talking about. But then her face twisted into something I can only describe as indignation, like she was furious that I'd discovered her secret. She accused me of snooping, of violating her privacy. I was too shocked to even respond. I just kept asking why, how long, what did she do? Eventually, she sneered and snapped that I shouldn't be surprised. "You always had it easy, Haley," she said, her voice dripping with resentment. "People felt sorry for you, the poor girl from the poor family, working so hard. You got the sympathy votes for everything. I'm just leveling the playing field." It was a punch to the gut. All those years, I thought she was my biggest cheerleader, and here she was admitting that she'd resented me, that she'd been siphoning off my identity for months, if not longer. She even tried to justify it by saying my credit was better than hers, apparently. She'd racked up debts in college living beyond her means, and she couldn't secure loans anymore. She saw my stable, if modest, financial history as a ticket to maintain her lavish lifestyle. Worst of all, she was unapologetic, claiming I owed her for all the times she'd helped me, for the babysitting, for the gifts. I told her I was going to the police. She laughed, daring me to try, saying there was no paper trail leading to her because everything was in my name. Then she reminded me that if the police got involved, it would ruin any chance I had at clearing my credit because it would become a legal mess I couldn't afford. I left her apartment that day feeling like a hollow shell. Lily and I drove home in silence, tears slipping down my cheeks while Lily asked if I was okay. I wanted to yell, to scream that I wasn't okay, that everything was crumbling. But I swallowed it down and told her I just wasn't feeling well, that it would be better soon. In the following days, I tried to rally my strength. I realized that going to the police was my only hope. So I filed another report, this time detailing my suspicions about Claire, pointing to the letters with my name and her address as proof. It was a complicated process, and the detective was cautious, explaining that convictions for this kind of identity theft were rare unless we could show consistent evidence linking her to the fraudulent accounts. I wondered if the system would fail me, but I refused to give up. Claire, meanwhile, ghosted me. She blocked my number, blocked me on social media, and vanished from her apartment by the time the police tried to question her. I went through a bizarre period where I couldn't decide if I was relieved she was gone or terrified of what she might do next. I tried to piece together my life, disputing fraudulent charges, begging the credit bureaus to listen. Some accounts were wiped from my credit, but others demanded more documentation, which I didn't have. My finances remained in shambles. I lost the chance at a better apartment, and Lily and I stayed put in our cramped unit, constantly worried about what might come next. Then, a few months after Claire disappeared, I got the news that my mom was very sick. She was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. My dad had passed away a year prior, so she had no one else to rely on. I juggled Lily's needs, my mom's medical appointments, and my job, barely holding it together. In the midst of this, I received an envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with a typed note, "I'm coming back for what's mine." It wasn't signed, but my blood froze. I recognized the subtle threat, the cryptic tone. Claire. I showed the note to the detective, who agreed it could be from her, though we had no proof. He advised me to stay alert, maybe even move if I could. But where could I go? My savings were drained. My job was the only steady anchor I had, along with Lily's preschool and my mom's proximity to the hospital. I tried to put it out of my mind, focusing on day-to-day survival, though I started feeling anxious whenever the phone rang or whenever I saw a car that looked like hers. Months dragged on with no more contact, and I started to relax, telling myself maybe she'd found a new scheme or a new target. Then, out of nowhere, I was served with legal papers. They were from a law firm representing someone named Claire, stating that she was filing for custody of Lily, alleging that I was an unfit mother who had committed financial fraud and was under investigation. I read the words over and over, my heart pounding so loudly I could hardly hear anything else. She was claiming that since I had committed identity theft and was on the brink of bankruptcy, Lily's well-being was at risk. She also claimed she'd been the primary caregiver at various points, babysitting, financial support, and that she had a stronger ability to provide a safe and stable home. I nearly collapsed on the kitchen floor, clutching the documents. My mind spun in circles. How could she twist reality like this? She was the one who stole my identity, but she was framing me as the thief. She was the one who had put me in financial ruin, and she was using that to her advantage. She even attached statements from credit card companies as evidence of my irresponsibility, not acknowledging that those were the very accounts she had fraudulently opened in my name. Fear and fury warred inside me, and I found myself shaking so hard that Lily, standing next to me, asked what was wrong. I had to force a smile, telling her everything would be okay, even though I felt like I was standing on the edge of an abyss. I reached out to any legal aid resources I could find, eventually landing an appointment with a pro bono lawyer who agreed to help me fight this. He warned me it would be an uphill battle, especially if Claire had decent funds to hire a more experienced attorney. I told him the truth, that she came from money, that her parents could easily bankroll this if they believed her story. My lawyer advised me to gather character witnesses, documentation of my actual finances, and any evidence of her wrongdoing. That meant tracking down old texts or emails, anything that could hint at her manipulation. But she'd been thorough in covering her tracks. My mom, even as she struggled with her health, tried to support me emotionally. She offered to testify that she'd never seen me neglect Lily, that Claire had only been a casual babysitter. But we needed more than that. We needed proof of Claire's malicious intent. I scoured my old phone backups and found fragments of texts suggesting she took out a credit card in my name. I recorded voicemails she'd left me, where she vaguely threatened me. It was something, but the lawyer still looked grim. He reminded me that family courts focus on the child's best interest, and Claire's argument was that I was financially unstable, owing to my poor decisions. The first hearing was a nightmare. Claire arrived in a tailored suit, her hair perfectly styled. She played the victim brilliantly, sniffing back tears as she described how she stepped up for Lily when I was too overwhelmed. She produced photos of Lily at her apartment playing with the dog, pictures that could easily be interpreted to show Lily was frequently in Claire's care. Her lawyer painted me as someone who had a history of financial recklessness and possible criminal activity. I sat there, tears burning in my eyes, trying to speak up for myself, telling the judge that Claire was the one who orchestrated the fraud. But the judge needed tangible evidence, not just accusations. After the hearing, the judge granted a temporary order for a home evaluation, meaning someone would come to inspect my living situation to determine if it was suitable for a child. Claire's home would also be evaluated. I felt sick. The state of my cramped apartment combined with my precarious financial situation, suddenly seemed like powerful ammunition for Claire. My lawyer consoled me, telling me that judges rarely separate a child from a biological parent without clear evidence of neglect or abuse. But I'd never felt so terrified. My stomach churned at the thought of losing Lily, of her being taken away from me and placed with a woman who had methodically destroyed my life. In the midst of all this, Lily started asking difficult questions. Why can't Claire come over anymore? I miss her dog. Why do people keep asking me about how we live? I tried to protect her innocence, but she wasn't oblivious. I ended up explaining in the simplest terms I could, Claire wants to say she's your mommy instead of me, and I have to go to a judge to make sure that doesn't happen. Lily scrunched her tiny face in confusion, insisting, "You are my mommy." Each time she said it, I felt a surge of resolve. I had to fight back with everything I had. Not long after, I had a breakthrough. My old coworker, a woman named Tasha, 32F, reached out to me. Tasha was a sharp, no-nonsense type who'd seen me juggling finances and dealing with suspicious account activity. She remembered me venting about how Claire had asked too many questions about my bank statements. Tasha had once overheard Claire on the phone in our break room. Claire had come by to surprise me for lunch, but I was out running an errand. Tasha swore she heard Claire dictating my social security number over the phone. At the time, Tasha hadn't understood what was going on. She just thought it was odd that Claire knew my social so well. Now, Tasha was willing to provide a statement about the incident. It was a small piece of the puzzle, but it was big enough to suggest that Claire had indeed been collecting my personal information. With my lawyer's help, we filed this new testimony as part of our defense. The next hearing was tense. Claire's lawyer tried to discredit Tasha, implying she had some personal vendetta or was seeking attention. But Tasha remained cool on the stand, calmly recounting what she'd heard. You could see Claire's composure falter for a split second, her lips tightening. My lawyer pressed the point, asking why Claire would have my social security number memorized well enough to recite it over the phone. Claire claimed I'd asked her to verify some insurance forms, which was a blatant lie. She had no proof of this, and the judge seemed unconvinced by her excuses. Still, the custody battle was far from over. During the home evaluations, I tried to present my apartment in the best possible light. My mom, frail and on oxygen, was there, providing emotional support. She told the evaluator about how I looked after her, balanced work, and cared for Lily. In Claire's home evaluation, she showed off a spacious house with a fenced yard, a spotless kitchen, and a luxurious child-friendly play area she had set up. The difference in our living conditions couldn't have been starker. I was genuinely terrified that, despite everything, the judge might think Lily would have a better life in that environment. But I clung to the belief that the judge would see through Claire's facade eventually. In the midst of this legal chaos, I confronted Claire in the hallway of the courthouse one afternoon, just after a brief hearing. We stood face to face, out of earshot of the attorneys. She looked me up and down with contempt, as if I were a stain on her otherwise pristine world. I mustered the courage to ask her one question. Why are you doing this? Why do you want my daughter? She smirked, crossing her arms. Because you don't deserve her, she said quietly. You've always been pitied by everyone. I'm going to show you and them who really has the upper hand. Lily will have a better life with me, and you can go crawl into whatever hole you came from. Hearing her say that made my entire body shake with rage and heartbreak. Over the next couple of weeks, my lawyer and I gathered every piece of evidence we could. We got old text messages from mutual acquaintances showing Claire bragging about her scam, though she never explicitly mentioned my name. We compiled the police reports I'd filed about the identity theft. My mom's doctors wrote letters explaining her condition and how I'd been her caretaker. Tasha stood firm as a witness, refusing to be intimidated by Claire's high-powered lawyer. Each piece alone might not have been enough, but together, they started to paint a picture of Claire as manipulative, deceitful, and potentially dangerous. Finally, the day of the final custody hearing arrived. I wore the only nice outfit I owned, with Lily holding my hand as I handed her off to a friend who waited outside the courtroom. My hands felt clammy, and my heart pounded so loudly I worried others could hear it. Claire arrived in another designer suit, flanked by her attorney. The hearing felt like it lasted an eternity. Witnesses were called, evidence was presented, arguments were made. I kept glancing at the judge, trying to read his expression. Did he believe me? Or was he impressed by Claire's polish and resources? Eventually, the judge left to deliberate. We waited in tense silence for what felt like hours, but was probably just 30 minutes. When he returned, he cleared his throat and began reading from his notes. He acknowledged that child custody cases focus on the best interest of the child, and that stable finances, housing, and emotional support are all factors. But then he said something that made my whole body tense. However, it appears that there are substantial indications that the petitioner, Miss Claire, has engaged in fraudulent activities against Miss Haley. Moreover, the court is not satisfied that Miss Claire's intentions align with Lily's best interests. Given the contradictory evidence presented and Miss Claire's inability to provide credible explanations regarding her relationship with Miss Haley's personal information. I don't remember hearing much else after that. All I know is that the judge denied Claire's petition for custody. He stated there was no evidence of me being an unfit mother, and that Lily belonged with me. Tears streamed down my face. I looked over at Claire, who sat stone-faced, her jaw tight, hands balled into fists. She refused to meet my eyes. My lawyer patted my shoulder, telling me we'd done it, that Lily was safe. But even as relief flooded me, a part of me remained on edge. I knew Claire. She wouldn't just give up. She was vengeful, controlling, and cunning. The judge's ruling was a huge victory, but I wasn't naive enough to think the war was over. Sure enough, in the weeks that followed, my bank accounts experienced attempted hacks. My car tires were mysteriously slashed one morning, and I received more anonymous threats in the mail, telling me I'd made a mistake crossing her. I filed more police reports, installed cameras around my apartment, and kept Lily close, refusing to let her out of my sight except for school or when she was with my mom. Despite the lingering fear, I felt a renewed sense of strength. With the legal issues more or less decided, I could focus on restoring my credit and forging a safer future for Lily. The detective on my case said that with the court's official records implying Claire committed fraud, they had more reason to pursue charges against her. Whether or not she'd face real consequences was another story, but I tried to stay hopeful. One evening, after I'd tucked Lily into bed, I sat in my living room and let myself breathe for the first time in months. I reflected on everything that had happened, the shocking betrayal by someone who had once been my best friend, the terrifying thought that I might lose my daughter, the battle in court that brought me to the brink of emotional collapse. Through it all, Lily remained my guiding light. She was the reason I kept fighting, the reason I dug deep to find courage I didn't know I had. And maybe that was one of the many things Claire overlooked. A mother's love isn't something you can replicate through wealth or charm or stolen identities. It's something real, visceral, and unbreakable. The road to recovery was long. I had to consult credit repair specialists, continue working with the police to document Claire's identity theft, and repeatedly assure Lily that no one was going to take her away. My mother's health was a roller coaster of minor improvements and setbacks, but we helped each other through the toughest days. Friends and coworkers, once just acquaintances, rallied around me, providing emotional support and even small financial contributions here and there to help me stabilize. Tasha, in particular, became one of my closest confidantes. She was the one who reminded me that none of this was my fault, that trusting someone isn't a crime, and that evil often lurks in the people we least suspect. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I grieve the friendship I lost. Despite everything, there's a part of me that mourns the Claire I thought I knew, the girl who shared secrets under blanket forts, who wrote me goofy poems in middle school, who was the first person to hold my hand when my dad died. That person is gone, replaced by someone manipulative, dangerous, and full of resentment. I'll never fully understand what twisted her into that version of herself, nor do I want to. My priority now is Lily, and ensuring she grows up in a world where she feels safe and loved. I still wonder what the future holds. Claire is out there somewhere. The charges for identity theft might stick, or she might slip away, or she might choose another approach to come after me. I don't underestimate her capacity for destruction. but I refuse to cower forever. I've learned the hard way that I need to stand my ground, protect what's mine, and never doubt my own strength. As of now, Lily and I are doing better. She's in kindergarten, making friends, bringing home drawings of flowers and rainbows that she tapes on the fridge. She's full of silly jokes and bedtime stories that make me laugh. My mom has started showing signs of improvement with a new medication. My finances, while still rocky, are inching towards stability as I continue disputing the fraudulent accounts. Most importantly, the bond between Lily and me has only grown stronger through this ordeal. She knows she's my number one priority, and I cherish every giggle, every new discovery she makes. I've changed too. I'm not as naive as I once was. My trust is harder to earn now, and I question people's motives more than I ever did before. But I've also discovered an inner resilience I didn't realize I had. There's a sense of empowerment in having survived one of the darkest chapters of my life. I've learned that even in the face of betrayal, you can find allies, you can find help, and you can fight back. You can pick yourself up off the floor, look your fears straight in the eye, and say, "Not today." If I had one piece of advice for anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, it would be, listen to your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is, and never be afraid to seek help, legally, emotionally, financially, from anyone who's willing to stand in your corner. Friends, family, counselors, law enforcement, lawyers, coworkers. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to help if you speak up. Even if it's embarrassing or scary, sharing your burden can be the difference between sinking and swimming. I won't pretend everything is sunshine and roses. There are still nights I jolt awake from nightmares where Claire shows up at my door, legal papers in hand, or snatches Lily at a playground. Trauma doesn't vanish overnight, but I refuse to let that fear dictate my life. I take reasonable precautions and I move forward. Each new day is another chance to breathe, to heal, and to build a safer world for my daughter. I'll always carry the scars of Claire's betrayal, but I'm no longer defined by them. I'm defined by how I rose up, how I protected my child, and how I claimed my identity back. That's the legacy I want Lily to see, one of resilience and love triumphing over cruelty. When Lily grows up and asks about the day someone tried to take her away from me, I'll tell her the truth, that I fought as hard as a mother could fight, and that in the end, love and truth prevailed. And that's the final note I want to leave this story on. Love and truth can prevail, even against enemies who know you inside and out, who have exploited your vulnerabilities in ways you never imagined. If someone as resourceful, well-funded, and intimately knowledgeable as my childhood best friend couldn't break me, then I believe the human spirit is stronger than we give it credit for. I am stronger than I ever knew, and so are all of us who've been betrayed, beaten down, and threatened. We survive. We fight. And with enough perseverance, we can win.